Positive Support Community of Practice. Introduction to Minnesota's Positive Supports Rule. Minnesota Rule 9544, October 13, 2015.
So many of you probably know that not everyone's going to need a positive support transition plan. So those are only required in those instances where prohibited procedures are being phased out, or the emergency use man restraint is used 3 times in 90 days or 4 times in 180. So not everyone's going to need a positive support transition plan. Not everyone is also going to need to have incidents reported via the BRF, but it's more likely that you're going to work with someone that requires the incident report via BRF than someone working with someone with a positive support transition plan. Statute requires certain incidents to be reported to both DHS and the Ombudsman for Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities. To prevent multiple reporting needs, DHS and the Ombudsman's office collaborated by creating the Behavior Intervention Report Form in July of 2013. We do have to say that it was intended originally to be a form that wouldn't last, I think, more than about 1.5 years as we move to another system. However, now with the codification of 9544, Behavior Intervention Report Form is now in the rule, and so we will always call the form Behavior Intervention Report Form, even if we move to another platform. Right now, online reporting, it's an online reporting form covering the reporting needs of the positive support rule. Those of you under 245D, you also know that it was the form that you would use to report certain data to the department, as well as your incidents of emergency use of manual restraint. The rule is now specific to those incidents that need to be reported via the Behavior Intervention Report Form. Again, if you have filled out a Behavior Intervention Report Form, but it's been a while, the front page has changed. Prior to the rule going into effect, the only way to get past the front page was to have a valid NPI or UMPI number. For those of you that don't know what an NPI or UMPI number is, that's okay, because we've now added the ability to report using a DHS license number. So again, as this rule only affects those people with a DHS license, you should have a DHS license number that you'll need at the front page of the Behavior Intervention Reporting Form. If you punch in the right number, you'll get to the next section of the Behavior Intervention Report Form. And here are those incidents that do need to be required by license holders via the Behavior Intervention Report Form. The first is the emergency use of manual restraint. Second, PRN psychotropic medication administration to intervene in a behavioral situation. 911 calls as a result of restrictive intervention, behavioral incident, or mental health crisis. Medical emergencies occurring due to a restrictive intervention leading to physician treatment or hospitalization. Mental health crises occurring as a result of the use of restrictive intervention, leading to a call to a mental health crisis service. An incident requiring a call to mental health mobile crisis intervention services. One of the things we want to note there before going too far on is the above mental health crises occurring as a result of restrictive intervention need to be reported. There is no add-on that the call to the mental health mobile crisis is the result of restrictive intervention. So all incidents requiring a call to mental health mobile crisis intervention services must be reported via the BRF. And my list is going on without me here, but a person's use of crisis respite services due to the use of restrictive intervention, and any intervention included in a positive support transition plan. The positive support transition plan calls out when the frequency that many of these need to be reported via the BRF. They may include mechanical restraint, timeout, seclusion, penalty consequences, and the programmatic use of manual restraint. It could also be that your team determines that you want to report something else via the BRF. The rule does allow that any additional incident identified by the team could be submitted via the Behavior Intervention Report Form. So we do have a set of Behavior Intervention Report Form instructions as well. We will have this PowerPoint, by the way. I'm sure we've got the questions already about where to receive this information. We do have our DSD training archive where you'll be able to see this PowerPoint as well. So all of these links should work for you when you access the materials after this training session. I'll actually call out that website because I'm sure many of you will want to go to this. This is one of the few trainings where we didn't send out materials ahead of time and are just posting after. And just to go back here again, the Behavior Intervention Report Forms do outline, again, more of the information that is required during the reporting or the completion of that BRF form. All right, so we're going to get into some of the frequently asked questions around documentation. This one came up particularly quite frequent during our August 11th presentation. If I'm not licensed under 245D and don't serve any person with a developmental disability or related condition, am I required to perform any of the positive support rule documentation requirements? The answer is no, but we'll qualify that. A 245A licensed provider not licensed under 245D or serving a person with a developmental disability or related condition will not need to complete the documentation requirements in 9544. However, should you serve a qualifying person in the future, you will need to provide them with a copy of your policy on the emergency use of manual restraint on service initiation. For that reason, we are recommending that every provider develop this policy or have that on hand for that circumstance. That is a recommendation, not a requirement. And again, we provided the link for you to access this once you receive this PowerPoint after the presentation. Next frequently asked question, can I create my own form to collect data on the incidence of behavior interventions and send this to the commissioner? Again, the answer is no, but also requires a qualification. The rule requires that all incidents be reported via the behavior intervention report form. License holders are welcome, however, to create their own forms for internal purposes, which could gather information for the staff responsible to complete the behavior intervention report form. So we just have about another 10 slides for you before we get to the Q&A section. We do want to talk about what to happen or what to do in those exceptional cases where positive support strategies haven't been successful in reducing the use of what is seen as a prohibited intervention. For those situations, a committee was created by the conditions of the positive support rule, known as the External Program Review Committee. This committee is appointed by the Commissioner of DHS, and they have a number of duties. One, importantly, is to review the request for the emergency use of a procedure for persons at imminent risk of serious injury due to self-injurious behavior. Currently, for you 245D providers that are listening, we do have a panel that are currently reviewing these requests. That panel is known as the Interim Review Panel. And so this is a provision that actually came from 245D then as well. What's new to the rule is that this External Program Review Committee will also review requests for the use of a prohibited procedure not specifically permitted or prohibited by 9544. So again, that's where we wanted to note the use of the term specific prohibitions in 9544. Everything listed in 9544 under the specific prohibitions, again, you couldn't request for the use of that procedure. But if you are looking at a procedure that is not specifically permitted or prohibited by the rule, you may send in a request for the use of that prohibited procedure to this panel to be reviewed. For both of these two items, though, the External Program Review Committee is not going to be the final say on whether or not the use of a procedure is going to be permitted. This committee is only making recommendations to the Commissioner to approve or deny the use of one of those procedures. It is ultimately up to the Commissioner to, again, approve or deny the use of those procedures, but it's necessary for you as a license holder or team or person receiving services to send your request through the External Program Review Committee first. The External Program Review Committee also has a number of duties that the IRP does not currently have. One is to evaluate programs and systems of a license holder making a request to ascertain overall capacity to serve the person. This committee will also be reviewing all reports on the emergency use of manual restraint, and they will have the duty to assess the competency of qualified professionals. So one thing that we want to note there is that while the assessment that it currently is out for qualified professionals on the DHS TrainLink site, while that's currently in use, it is possible that when the External Program Review Committee is created and review the competency of the qualified professionals in the system, it's possible that they may require more than just the current assessment. So that's something to continue to watch in the future. At this time, though, notice I believe we'll go out to looking for External Program Review Committee members, and we expect that committee to assemble sometime around January of this year. So up until that time, the Interim Review Panel will be working in their stead to review all those requests that may be coming in for the use of a procedure. I'm sure those of you that are working with those exceptional cases are wondering how you submit those requests. Requests do need to be made by the provider and license holder using the official request form, but a number of signatures are needed on there, so it's not just the license holder alone that's working on those requests. The request of the authorization for the emergency use procedures can be found again in the electronic documents section of the DHS website. It's codified as 6810D. So again, that's in the Positive Support Transition Plan document section. We do want to direct you to some additional training opportunities that are in the works. The Department of Human Services has contracted with the University of Minnesota to offer a number of trainings, and you can see some links here. One on person-centered thinking and planning training. We also have opportunities around positive behavior support intensive trainings. You can follow this link here. Luckily, it's shorter than many of the DHS links. We're also going to have an information session on person-centered and positive behavior support training opportunities. We're expecting that in early November. You can follow the site listed here or email the university at the contacts listed at the website that you see here as well. And something that's available to you right now as well is, again, DHS is contracted with the College of Direct Support to make certain courses available for free or a discount based on the size of the provider. There are some trainings within this area that may be applicable to the positive support rule, such as trainings on person-centered planning and positive behavior support. If you are a provider agency serving more than 11 individuals, we have a specific contact here for you, Olivia Sellers. And if you're a provider agency serving 10 or fewer individuals with disabilities, or if you're a county or tribal DHS staff, an individual with disabilities that self-directs your services, a family member, or a member of an advisory group or a member of a board, you can contact Nancy McCullough. The training would be free to you if you fall under one of those categories. And the reason why you have to contact is you will need some login information and registration to get into the system then as well. And we want to note a couple of other areas that you might go for resources. I'm going to try to go to a couple of these links here as long as I'm connected. The first is a Positive Supports Minnesota site. Now, I'm being told that the site is not exactly live yet. You'll see a number of coming soon areas, but you can find resources here around positive supports and positive support strategies as you're, again, developing those strategies or perhaps creating positive support transition plans. And so the site is live now, and more information is to come. One of the things that made, I think, particularly confusing for some providers about the positive supports rule is you couldn't access Rule 9544 on the revisor's website until about halfway through September. So we do want to note that those of you that were looking for the rules on the revisor's site and couldn't find them, that the rules are live, and you can see the specific language in the rule on the revisor's site. Many of you will also be perhaps interested in the positive support rule docket page if you're looking for information on the history of the rule or some of the important documents during the promulgation process. It's a very long title. Hopefully you'll use our link. Otherwise, if you Google proposed adoption of rules governing positive support strategies and repeal of rules governing aversive and deprivation procedures, we're the only website out there with that title. Relatively easy to find. And one of the things that I wanted to note in particular is kind of the different versions of the rules that we've gone through, but also importantly our statement of need and reasonableness on the rule. So if ever you're out there and you don't want to send in an email but want to look for a quick reference on what a provision of the rule might mean, you can go to the statement of need and reasonableness. For every provision in the rule, it was necessary that the department prove that that provision was necessary and reasonable. So an explanation of almost every line that's in the rule now is provided in the SONAR. You do want to state that the SONAR was written for a previous version of the rule than we have now, so not every provision is covered by the SONAR, but many are, and so you can find many of your answers in that statement of need and reasonableness. And I've got a direct link here for you too if you don't want to go through our positive support rule docket page. The next common question is where to find these materials after the training. Of course, to use my direct link here, you're going to already have to find this somehow. But we do include this PowerPoint in the Disability Services Division Training Handouts Archive page. I'm going to go there, one, to show you all of the trainings that we've already conducted through the Positive Support Community of Practice. So we have a number of materials and other videos about specific topics pertinent to person-centered planning and positive support strategies that you might access them as well as you're looking for more information on positive support strategies. Many of our videos for each of these trainings are available. You would have to email us to get a copy of these videos at this point, as we don't have them posted on our website due to accessibility concerns. But many of these trainings were, again, recorded, and so you could have access to those. The PowerPoint for today will be listed here under the Positive Support Community of Practice training archive then as well. So that's where you'll be able to access this PowerPoint. And I want to bring you to one more area as we talk about upcoming trainings that might be coming. You can find those trainings on the DSD Training News and Information. Due to the scope of the rule, it was difficult trying to get to all of the license holders that fall under the purview and where to put this central information. So many of our trainings on the rule are going to be posted through the Disability Services Division. Many of you under 245A licenses might not have heard of us before, the Disability Services Division, which is why we wanted to make sure that you're aware of this page and where to look for future trainings. Here you'll also find some direct links to the trainings that are currently available, including our training on TrainLink on the Positive Supports Rule. This is, again, the Commissioner's Assessment for qualified professionals. We also have various trainings available around being person-centered that are currently coming up then as well. The trainings that we talked about on that are coming up in early November surrounding person-centered planning and positive behavior support will be posted here as well. And we've talked about our electronic documents a number of times. If you are interested in receiving regular kind of announcements around these types of trainings, like the Positive Support Community Practice, we also have listed here our instructions on how to subscribe for the Disability Services Division e-list. This is a volunteer list that does go out with a number of different pieces of information, but important for you would be any training on the Positive Support Rule will go through our e-list as well. We've also been trying to work with each of the licensing areas, though, to make sure that you can receive notification of these trainings as they come soon. All right, so we did cover a lot of information today, but hopefully you feel you received a broad tutorial of the provisions of the Positive Support Rule. Again, those provisions are listed here. We pretty much walk through these section by section or part by part. Before moving to the Q&A, again, we just want to reiterate kind of the final purpose of this rule as we see it in the rule. The rule states that the rule is meant to promote community participation, person-centeredness, and inclusion in the most integrated setting. And there is a definition of most integrated setting within the rule in 245D then as well. The rule focuses on creating quality environments, ensuring collaborative development of positive support strategies, increase skills and self-determination of people receiving services, to improve the quality of life of people receiving services by ensuring that they're free from humiliating and demeaning procedures, and eliminating the use of aversive and deprivation procedures. And as you can see, and we've talked about a few times, the rule was meant to create a consistent set of standards for providers across service settings. It's important to know that the rule doesn't work alone. It does work in conjunction with Minnesota Statutes 245D. And there are requirements surrounding the creation of positive support transition plans within the PSTP instruction document. And there are instructions around the completion of a behavior intervention report form within those BRF instructions then as well. So those are things that you should become familiar with if this rule, again, pertains to you, the people that you work with, or someone that you are a family member of. And with that, we're going to move into our Q&A portion. So again, I'd like to remind you, we've got actually 850 people registered for the training today, so we are expecting a question or two, I think, to come in. We do have a room full of staff here to help you out, but because of how many people that we have today, we are asking, even if you're at a live site, hopefully you have access to a computer and can send your question to positive supports, state.mn.us. Again, that'll allow us to group the questions and at least track all the questions as they come in. So if we don't get to your question today, we can get to it after this training today.
All right. So the first question we have is, do all staff need to complete the core training, or is it just for new employees? This person has staff that's been there for many years.
Sure. Yeah, the section on core training isn't specific to orientation, so that does mean that any staff with responsibilities noted in the core training area would need to take this training. For new staff, of course, that would be during the orientation period, and the rule does note that that training must be received before the person is responsible to develop, monitor, or implement positive sport strategies.
Okay. If we have to evaluate strategies every 6 months, what would be done if the team only meets on an annual basis?
We would have to modify it and meet every 6 months to evaluate it.
Sure. And I'm going to see, I'm not sure if everyone is able to hear you. So our answer, yeah, we should try to get one of these back there.
That question directly relates to the positive support rule, meaning that the team would still need to meet every 6 months regarding this aspect of the requirement of the rule. If they only spoke about that portion of the rule, that's fine. It's not intended to have the team discuss other portions of services if that's something that they would just do on an annual basis.
This is a question on FBAs and positive support transition plans. You had indicated that a FBA is required for target behaviors identified in a PSTP. If we serve individuals that do not have a PSTP, but have formal outcomes that identify target behaviors for reduction, do we need to complete an FBA for these individuals?
That's a good question, and I know it's a ways back, but the FBA requirement is surrounding the modification or development of written interventions for target behaviors. And so I think a couple of things to consider there is whether or not you probably need to have a positive sport transition plan at this time anyways. Depends on what types of interventions you're already using. The only time that it is required by the rule that written interventions are created for target behaviors. I should also note that there's a specific definition of target behavior in here as well as a specific definition of interfering behavior. Even though you're using the term target behavior, it's possible that what you're referring to is actually only considered an interfering behavior by the rule. And so the rule is very specific that when those written interventions are developed or modified to address target behavior, then an FBA would be required.
We have a question on the BRF and who it needs to be reported to. If you submit the BRF, do you then need to send in the following information to DHS and the Ombudsman in a separate document, or will all of that information be included on the BRF? And they're wondering about the incident report, the internal review, and the summary of the expanded support team.
You know, that's a great question, particularly because I skipped over that. I think it's important to note that upon completion of a behavior intervention report form, the form is automatically sent to both the Department of Human Services and the Ombudsman's office. And so that fulfills your obligation to report to both of those agencies. So the intention was to make this a one form that you would have to complete and then submit for both agencies and save you a little time.
I just want to expand. This is Paula from DHS Licensing. There are requirements in children's residential facilities as well as the Rule 36 IRTS variants regarding reporting of critical incidents. So you'll still need to make those reports to DHS Licensing unless we can, along the way, develop a system where we can kind of combine those. But at this point in time, it would still be separate requirements.
We've had a few questions on board members and trainings, what trainings they all need to partake in. So maybe I know you touched on that, but what if board members are silent partners, how invested they are, and if they would have to take the 4-hour training and the 2-hour function training.
Sure. So yeah, this is I think when we covered our FAQ on executives, it didn't specifically call out probably our #1 question about who qualifies as an executive had to do with nonprofit boards and whether or not the nonprofit board members would be considered executives or managers. And it was determined that nonprofit board members would most likely fall underneath the definition of executive or manager. But when we talked about those executive or managers that aren't responsible for some of the other duties surrounding positive sports strategies, most likely many of your board members wouldn't fall underneath the core training then as well.
What is the time frame to complete the core training, according to the rule?
Another question, a common question. The only answer that we can really give, there is no time frame provided in the rule, other than the training must be completed before a person's responsible to, again, develop, monitor, implement positive support strategies, which really means that those trainings need to be completed ASAP for your current staff. Should be done. And then it should be done during the orientation period, again, before the person is responsible for those duties.
Okay. We have some questions that are fairly similar, so I'm just going to This person is a 245D provider for 2 people on the DD waiver that provides intensive supports for adult foster care in our home. What kind of documentation is applicable in family foster care?
So let me, I think I can, there's that there. So I'm bringing up our slide specific to the exemption surrounding documentation. If I can find it. Believe it or not, there are 86 slides. So again, the question was specific to family foster care, right?
Foster care.
Again, there is that exemption from the documentation of general positive support strategies activities. So that's specific to the need to develop positive support strategies and incorporate that into a current document of some kind. That is only an exemption from that documentation. It doesn't mean that you don't have to create positive support strategies, so that's important to note. And as noted on the slide here too, the family foster care would not be exempt from reporting using the behavior intervention report form, notifying person on the policy on emergency use of manual restraint, and if for any reason you do need to create a positive support transition plan, would not be exempt from the development of those plans.
Another question on functional behavior assessments and who would be responsible and when. This is about case managers. When would case managers be responsible to complete the functional behavior assessment?
Sure. Yeah, that's one of the things that we want to call out with the definition of qualified professional. And so depending on what service you're talking about, and again, we've got, I think, 23 different categories that are listed under qualified professional. So without knowing what service that you're working with here as a case manager, I would just recommend that you take a look at the definition of qualified professional. And there you'll be able to see who can act as a qualified professional for each service. The intention was with the development of that definition was that someone that is already working in each of the services could qualify as a qualified professional. So each of the teams wouldn't need to go automatically and look for an external qualified professional. But there are a number of services where a case manager is identified as a possibility for qualified professional. So again, I would recommend that you take a look at that definition.